feedback on one of my more recent videos that I don't necessarily agree with. Keep watching to find out more. The video in question, which I'll link to at the end of this video, was a very, very short video, 60 seconds long, where I was saying that I was up in the hills mid-December here in the Northern Hemisphere, and because of the conditions in the forecast, I'd essentially just taken with me my typical summer mountaineering gear, despite it being mid-December. Whilst much of the feedback I got about that video was very positive, there was some developmental feedback that I got that kind of fell into two separate categories. One of the categories was people saying that the video was reckless, and that what I was doing was potentially suggesting to people who were less experienced than I was that it was okay to go up into the hills in winter with summer type gear. And I must admit, on reflection, that there's probably something in that statement. I kind of agree with that. I didn't feel it was reckless, which is what I'll come on to later on in this video, but I completely get, because it was such a short video, only 60 seconds long or thereabouts, that I didn't caveat in that video because of the duration, but that's on me. I didn't caveat that issue around don't try this at home, folks, or don't try this if you're a newcomer. So yeah, to those people who said the video is reckless, or the message is reckless, or the message is potentially misleading to newcomers, yeah, I'm on your side there. I think with the benefit of hindsight, I wish I'd included something like that. So that was some of the feedback that I'm on board with. I can get my head around that, and I agree with that. And then there was the second group of feedback. The second group of feedback, which came from several different people, both publicly and kind of privately, said that despite those conditions that I was out with at the time being good conditions, you should always prepare for the worst. And I fundamentally don't and can't agree with that sentiment. You should always prepare for the worst. I get where it's coming from, and when you say it and don't really think about it, it kind of seems really logical and good advice. But when you pull it apart, personally, I don't think it makes the blindest bit of sense, and here's why. If we always prepared for the worst, we'd never get out of bed, or we'd never step foot out of the house, or we'd never leave the car, or we'd never stray from the well-defined tourist path. Being outdoors, doing outdoorsy things, has an element of risk in it. That's not to say that we should be blind to those risks, or we should be reckless with those risks, but doing outdoorsy things has an element of risk involved in it. But this aspect of you should always be prepared for the worst. Let's just think about this. Imagine that I was going out, or you were going out for a walk in the hills for a day and a night in a beautiful, amazing summer conditions. Middle of an Indian summer, there's something approaching a heat wave. The medium to long term weather forecast is no change in the conditions. It's perfect summer conditions for being outdoors and enjoying yourself. Would you still take an ice axe and crampons and Four Seasons sleeping bag and full face balaclava and winter mountaineering boots and 3 pairs of gloves and etc, etc, etc? If you were being prepared for the worst, if you're preparing for the worst, then you would, because the worst would be that for some reason, out of the blue, with no meteorological warning, it suddenly started snowing and temperatures plummeted to near, if not sub-zero, and that we went from being in amazing summer conditions to being in awful winter conditions with no warning, no change in the visible conditions outdoors, no forecast on the amazing apps that many of us carry. That would be preparing for the worst. But here's the thing, those things just don't happen. Yes, you can have sudden changes in the weather, that happens, but they don't just happen. There's always leading indicators that time and experience and paying attention to weather forecasts will give you an indication of. So this being prepared for the worst, it doesn't stand up, Because if we were always prepared for the worst, we'd always go out carrying every piece of equipment that we had for the worst conditions we could possibly imagine. And let's be honest, nobody watching this video ever does that. We dress for the conditions that we're going out in. We carry the kit and equipment appropriate for what the forecast is suggesting is going to happen. And we hopefully carry some equipment in case things go badly wrong, like a first aid kit, something like that. We don't go out prepared for the worst, because that's just not feasible. It's just not logical. Again, I get the sentiment, I get this whole being prepared for the worst, but I think it's being prepared for the worst given the conditions and forecast that you as a seasoned outdoors person have looked at. Going back to that video, that 30-second video, my day out in the hills in December, the worst was not a deterioration in conditions. The UK had a massive high pressure hanging over it. It had done for days beforehand. It continued to do so for about a week to 10 days afterwards. There was going to be no deterioration as such in conditions that I didn't feel I wasn't carrying the right equipment to deal with. So for those of you that left the feedback, thank you. It's always good to have my thinking challenged. It's always good to have people sort of push back slightly and engage in what has been, I have to say, very adult, very mature, very non-YouTube type of conversation. So thank you for sort of pushing back on that. It did make me think a little more. It has led me to putting this video together to get the other side of my thinking out there. If you've enjoyed watching this video and you want to take a look at those summary type conditions in winter, then check out the video that's appearing in the top corner of your screen right now. Take care, folks.